Well, I'm absolutely thrilled to have Andy Webb with me today. Andy is, of course, as you'll know if you've been keeping up with your royal news in the past few days, the author of the book Diana-Rama, which is the story really of the cover-up of the Princess Diana Panorama interview. Of course, you'll all remember that famous interview 30 years ago when Diana said that her marriage was a bit crowded with three of them in it, and that she didn't think Charles would be king. Andy is a incredible reporter, really dogged. He's stuck on this story for years. He first did a documentary that exposed Martin Bashir's lies to get Diana to agree to the interview. And he's now done a follow-up book, I suppose. Well, Andy, is it a follow-up book, or I mean, what is new? You tell us yourself about what this book is and how it moves the story on from what you did in your documentary 5 years ago.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's thank you for the very kind introduction, Tom. Yeah, I mean, the book, I suppose, surely does two things. One, it explains, and I think really for the first time in detail, exactly how Martin Bashir got this interview, because the official report that was done into it doesn't nearly begin to tell us exactly what happened. So I'm able to tell you that. But for me, very much the most important part of the book really looks at the way that Diana could have been, in my view, saved from the dreadful consequences of this interview, but was not saved. And by that, I mean, there was a point where the BBC, Martin Bashir's employers, where the managers at the BBC knew certain things. They knew that Martin Bashir had used forged documents. They knew that he'd deployed his forged documents, and they knew that he'd lied about deploying his forged documents. Now, none of those things were passed on to Princess Diana. If they had have been, then she would have known that she had been hoaxed and forgeries had been used. And there's a really, really strong case for saying that her life would not have progressed in the way it did, which, as we know, ended in her death a little over 18 months later. And that is the really, really heartbreaking thing for her family to have to, which of course they have had to over the years, but to face that there is a very plausible chance that Diana would be alive today, would be 64 years old, grandmother of 5 children. And to know that that's a real plausible possibility if the bosses, the people who are supposed to have the moral compass and the maturity and so on and so forth, if they'd have done what they should have done, anyway, yes, there's your answers to that.
Yeah. You've said Diana was groomed and gaslighted into doing the interview with Bashir. And of course, just to catch people up who aren't familiar with Andy's work. So Andy essentially revealed that Bashir had used forged bank statements. And what the new book, that he'd presented forged bank statements to Diana's brother, Charles Spencer, to get Diana to do the interview, to feed her sense of paranoia that people were informing against her and taking money to inform against her. And what's so remarkable about the new book is Andy shows through his freedom of information requests that the BBC knew that these forged statements were used before Diana died. And I think that's why Andy makes this argument that had the information been passed on to Diana, her life would have gone in a different trajectory. Is that fundamentally what you mean when you say that Diana was groomed and gaslit? Is that really what you're talking about, Andy?
It is. I mean, and I think it's useful. This happened, or the interview was 30 years ago, exactly 30 years ago. But to put that sort of modern language around it, the situation is you've got a 34-year-old single mum. Yes, she's a princess, but she is a 34-year-old single mum princess. She is targeted by this predatory male, Martin Bashir. And indeed, he grooms her and gaslights her. He terrifies her into a certain mindset with the most extraordinary things. I mean, he told her that her husband, then Prince Charles, as he was, King Charles as he now is, was planning to have her murdered, planning to have Camilla who is now the Queen of England, of course, planning to have her murdered as well, in order to clear the field for Prince Charles to pursue his affair. Of course, it's all absolute nonsense, but pursue his affair with the nanny that the couple had, or at least Prince Charles had, Tiggy Legg Burke. Now, Diana had been groomed into believing this sort of stuff. And you say to yourself, well, is anybody really going to believe, my husband has taken out a contract on my life and so on and so forth? Put yourself in Diana's position at that time in her life. I mean, she's the most, if you like, probably the most famous person in the world, I think it's fair to say. So, but she's an enormous scrutiny. But she does know for a fact at this point in her life that her phone calls have been tapped and the results of them broadcast, to the world in a very, very embarrassing way. I don't know if your viewers and listeners will recognize the phrase "squidgy gate," but there was a famous case where a very embarrassing phone conversation that she'd had with a boyfriend, his pet name for her was Squidgy, and that was broadcast. So Diana knew that. She was also really concerned about what I'm convinced was a coincidental tragedy, but somebody that she had something of a relationship with. Once that ended, 4 or 5 months later, he's killed in a motorbike crash. So again, those are just a couple of the things. We know that Diana was under surveillance at the time, really for quite legitimate, benign reasons, if for no other reason than at that point in history, the IRA were still operating very actively in London. So Diana knows that her phone's been tapped. She's got serious suspicions about the death of this former friend and partner, so on and so forth. When the BBC, when Martin Bashir, representing the British Broadcasting Corporation in his suit and his wire-in glasses and his forged documents, when he comes along and offers this, these incredible stories, yes, Diana did believe them, but I think many people would. I don't think you
would, Andy, because I think what is so fascinating about her, as you say, is that Barry Manicky you're referring to, who was killed? Yeah, exactly. So we've got Barry Manicky's death. We've got all these phone calls being leaked. There's a spate of leaking coming out of Buckingham Palace. I mean, there was an incredible story the other day saying that even Sarah Ferguson was being tapped on the orders of Prince Philip. Well, I mean, who knows whether it was on the orders of Prince Philip or not, but there was certainly, and of course, when the famous Tampon Gate tape was leaked, the ham radio thing of it being and I've written about this before, how the tape was retransmitted over amateur radio in the UK, apparently in the hope that someone would pick it up, which sure enough they did. So, I mean, there were certainly reasons to be paranoid, weren't there, if you were the Princess of Wales in 1996?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, again, strip away the royalness of this. If it had happened to anybody, you, me, or any one of your sort of viewers, if they knew for a fact that their phones were being tapped and the conversations broadcast. So yes, it's when that word is used about Diana that she was paranoid. I think that's always slightly really unfair. It sounds like some kind of psychiatric diagnosis, which maybe misapplied. I mean, the fact is, she did believe these stories, and we know that because somebody who I've worked with closely, writing the book, her former private secretary Patrick Jeffson, 7 days before the Panorama interview was recorded on camera, there was a critical meeting at which Patrick was present, when he says Diana dictated what was in effect, he thought, her sort of last will and testament. He said that if she were to wash up in the Thames one morning, then people would know the score. And
was this the moment where she wrote the famous note saying, my husband is planning an accident for me in my car? Is that the Mishcon note?
It was a few days. That note was written in October. There's no date on that note, but the meeting I'm talking about was October the 30th. So it was within days, exactly. So it's within that very, very same period when she writes the note saying, my husband's planning my death in a car crash. Interestingly, she says, Camilla is just a decoy. So, clearly, and this is Diana writing a note to herself, to herself. So one can, I think, assume that she's sort of telling it like it is. Then there is this meeting, as I say, which Patrick describes as like a last will and testament, where she dictates. She's really passing on the material that Bashir has filled her head with. Diana says that the Queen, the Queen Elizabeth, that is, of course, the late Queen. She said the Queen is going to abdicate in 6 months' time. That's April of 1996. So the Queen is going to go. She repeats the stories of the death plot that Prince Charles has, that she and Camilla are going to be taken out. She says, she goes as far as to say that the nanny, Tiggy Legg Burke, the 30-year-old nanny, had actually had an abortion, assuming the father to be Prince Charles, and that Diana said that she was just about to receive a certificate to prove that this abortion had taken place. Now, all of these things were dictated, again, in private. It's not that she was, trying to convince people here. She was getting her solicitor to note these things down and lock it away in his safe. Then, 7 days later, she goes in front of the Panorama camera. And what she doesn't do is relay all of these extraordinary things about murder threats and abdications and so on and so forth, because that's not the aim of the Panorama interview. The aim of the interview is really, really specific. Martin Bashir had laid out a scenario whereby Diana lets Buckingham Palace, lets the royal family know that she's not going anywhere. She's not going anywhere. You can't mess with me. Now, towards the end of the interview, Bashir asks her, so do you think Prince Charles, would make a good king? And Diana answers to the effect, you know what, I don't think he would. I don't think he's fit, cut out for it. I don't think that would work. And when you sort of realize the scenario that Bashir had painted, that Diana had unfortunately accepted, was that, okay, so 6 months down the line, the Queen is gone, she's abdicated. Prince Charles has taken the message, he's taken the message, and he's going to effectively exile himself to his lovely estate, his lovely home at Highgrove. What do you have? Prince William is on the throne. And in that scenario, Diana's position is really quite a rosy one, because there's the mother of the teenage king.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, she's being threatened with assassination.
Yeah.
On the other, if you do the Panorama thing, it's all rosy. And that was what Diana was tragically in her mind.
Andy, just trip me through. So you worked closely with Charles Spencer in the production of this book. I don't think that's a secret that he helped you and cooperated with you and shared notes and documentation with you. One of the incredible details that Andy has in this book is that Bashir told Charles Spencer and Diana in one meeting, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that William had a bug placed in a watch that was spying on it and listening to Diana's conversations. I mean, incredible kind of James Bond type fantasies, but it is in a way easy to see why Diana fell for them, and in a way it's kind of, I sort of wondered, do any of her family believe that there was more to her death, and we were told that there was either foul play around it or a cover up after it?
Oh, Tom, I really don't know. I mean, I certainly haven't heard anything to that effect. I don't think that's. I mean, what I have, for what it's worth, is that no, there are no suspicions from her family that her death was other than a tragic accident, but something that very plausibly might not have happened had she not been in that situation, being driven by a drunken driver who's probably speeding, and he smashes into the pillar in the Pont d'Alma tunnel. I think they're clear that she need not have been there, but the question of conspiracies and death plots at that point, I don't think that really comes into it.
They reject them. And do you draw a line directly from, I mean, it seems like there is a very clear line from the Panorama interview, from Bashir's lies that got her into the chair at Panorama to her decision to fire all those people around her, including Patrick Jefferson, who was fired. And is that is certainly what William said in his statement after the Dyson report, that the interview effectively left her isolated and alienated from people who could have helped her and people who she should have trusted, but she was convinced were working against her. And I guess very painful for people like Patrick.
No, for Patrick, absolutely all sorts of reasons for it to be painful, quite apart from the reasons that Prince William would have, i.e. that his mother has died. I mean, Patrick Jefferson, for 25 years, the interview went out in November of 95, in January of 96, so let's say 4 or 5 weeks later, Patrick is gone. He's gone. And he was with Diana for 8 years. He never saw or spoke to her again. And he said the most heartbreaking thing is that he knows that Diana went to her death thinking still that he had betrayed her, that he had taken £40,000, according to Martin Bashir, to spy on her, and so on and so forth. Now, it took 25 years for the truth to be revealed to Patrick. And I can say, and he would say, that it was work that I did that brought that to light, and that was of profound importance to him. I got to say, I mean, as a journalist, what was very unusual about working on this whole story was that usually when you're working with sources, it's kind of it's one-way traffic. You're saying, and information is coming your way, but because of the curious nature of it, I was learning stuff that was then of profound interest to people like Patrick Jefferson or Charles Spencer, Diana's brother, and so on and so forth. So the passage of information was kind of very, very much two-way. And I describe it in the book as regards Charles Spencer, it almost became like a sort of a partnership. I was finding stuff out and then saying, well, Charles, what does this mean? And then he would, and I've got to say, for several people, were in this position for 25 years, just not knowing what had happened. Let's just quickly say something about a chap called Matt Wiesler, who was the BBC graphic artist, a lovely guy who had been, in a way, conned as well by Martin Bashir into producing these bank statements, which were forgeries. Matt made them for Martin Bashir. Matt had concerns about how they may have been used. He went to the BBC, he became a whistleblower, but the BBC, in their covering up of events, Matt Wiesler was then blacklisted from the BBC. He'll never work for the BBC again. His career went right off a cliff.
He runs a bicycle shop now, doesn't he, in Bristol or something?
Well, he's down in the West Country. Yeah. It's to do with bicycles.
It's an incredible story, the story of Matt Wiesler. I mean, he produced these documents. He was told that they were going to be B-roll for a film. He was told they were just a prop to go in the background of a film. Produced these documents, repeatedly tried to tell the BBC that what he'd been asked to do with Bashir, repeatedly tried to blow the whistle, as you say, completely ignored. You uncovered, I think, something like, is it 300,000 documents or 30,000 documents? Or
it was 3,288 documents, which then translated into, I think it was 10,336 pages. So 3,000 documents, and they blah, blah, blah.
I'd say the long winter nights just flew by, Andy. Did you find, Matt, for example, like Matt Wiesler's emails in there going, look, hang on a sec, I've been roped into, this, and you have this incredible detail about him turning up at Kensington Palace to pay his respect and feeling so responsible.
That's extraordinary. But no, those particular emails you mention, those are in response to a very, very specific freedom of information request. Yes, I did ultimately win this 3-year legal battle to the extent that the court ordered the BBC to hand over the 10,000 pages of documents. But the BBC were allowed to make in excess of 3,000 separate redactions and indeed remove certain documents. So by the time I got my massive pile of documents, they were just covered in black stripes and with the full knowledge, of course, that it's the BBC who've applied these redactions. And I must admit, the way they behaved throughout this whole saga, it's absolutely not impossible that they would be covering up information that they didn't want to be seen. I mean, I can say that without fear of, any sort of legal retribution, because on at least 2 occasions, they have just lied literally in black and white, something that they say is just not so. So I have no confidence whatsoever in the integrity of those redactions, that there isn't an extra black stripe somewhere where there shouldn't be.
William and Harry have talked a lot about wanting transparency about the interview. Do you seem to be suggesting there that the whole truth isn't out yet, and that there may be more to be told about this story, or do you think that they have been told that? Do you think they do have all the information? Is there really more to come, or is this the end now, 30 years later?
No, I don't think it is, and that's not just not just the journalists sort of refusing to give up. I mean, it's been a fascinating inquiry, but I'm at a point where I'm really prepared to say to young journalists out there, get in, get stuck in. There's plenty of story left here. I mean, for instance, I was able to discover that 4 key documents, if you like, the smoking guns, the most incriminatory documents that I'm aware of, had been removed from the BBC archives, had been removed. And the BBC have never yet explained how it happened. Now, we only know it, we put a number 4 on it because luckily copies turned up elsewhere. Now, I'm really prepared to believe that there will be more documents that went missing. Maybe there were 10, maybe there were 20, maybe there were many more. And indeed, what's to say that if the BBC are prepared to act like that, to have the archives weeded at the dangerous material, to not be upfront and open and transparent about why they went missing, maybe there are some documents in the archive that have never yet seen the light of day. So I'll tell you one, I think, a little fascinating side story that I only became aware of too late to get into the book. But it's when you know this, I think, that you begin to get a bit of a handle on just how toxic this whole thing is. And the BBC, venerable institution, more than 100 years old, it's always taken very seriously the business of having an official institutional historian, somebody whose job is to have full access to the archives, and they compile weighty tomes of history. Now, it suddenly occurred to me that, and they run about 30 years behind events. So the history book we currently have goes up to 1987, 1922, 6 volumes, 1987. I got onto the official historian and said, oh, look, fascinating. I can't wait to see a next volume, 87 to 2000, let's say, because this scandal is going to be slap bang in the middle. I can't wait to read that. And I was told, no, the BBC has stopped doing official histories. They're not doing any more official history.
Right.
So history has been cancelled. History has been cancelled. And it is absolutely apparent that it's too toxic to write. The BBC, I won't go on too long about it, but the BBC said to me, oh, no, we're not out of the history game. We did actually commission a centenary history of the BBC, centenary history, came out in 2022. I looked at that. You skate, and it doesn't include a reference to the most momentous interview the BBC has ever done. It's not in centenary history. Now, I say, once you know that, I think you know what the BBC.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much, Andy. It's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you. The book that you can see on the screen there is called Panorama: Deception, Entrapment, Cover-Up, The Betrayal of Princess Diana. I hope I got that right, Andy. Did I? Show us the copy of your cover of your book there. You've got it there. I can see next to you.
Yes, there we are. There it is.
Fantastic. Well done. It's a incredible read, and Andy's a remarkable journalist, and we're very privileged to have him on today. Thanks very much. Thanks very much, everybody, for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.